This week on Upside, we are talking about the BBC selling kids shows on YouTube. We've got a mega EU trade deal. EU's version of Starlink. Can Open Cosmos do the do? US energy deals versus the EU. The UK is now dropping digital IDs. We're looking inside Anthropic's co-work. Grok versus government, and deals of the week.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
First up, I don't listen. I'm going to go through some quick news, and then please chime in where you think there's something worth talking about. The first in the quick news bucket is BBC's on YouTube, which was one of yours, Mads. And I thought this is quite an interesting one, that the BBC is obviously now looking in, my assumption is survival mode, distributing through YouTube, mainly for younger people. So I did a little bit of digging into YouTube, which is just bloody massive. I mean, they own 2.5 billion active users globally, YouTube, where iPlayer, 14 million weekly active users, BBC, roughly 500 million weekly consumers of BBC content. So YouTube's just a behemoth. But did anyone want to pick up on anything here? Mads, you threw this in. Anything you wanted to chat about?
Yeah, there's some interesting comments to share there, perhaps. The BBC is obviously not without controversy. They've had their challenges over the last few years, several misjudgments, especially around BBC News and the editorial line. But it's not all bad. We know there's been a ton of great content created over the years. And actually, the BBC was early around digital, and the iPlayer was quite a visionary product when it was brought out. In fact, to the point of in Netflix being originally inspired by some of the iPlayer innovation and saying, look, this is great. This is one of the directions we should consider going in. Now, at that time, the BBC was keen to develop the iPlayer concept into something commercial, and there was a fear that it could be a monopolistic move and that they would crush startups, and it's a sort of a quasi-government entity, and they shouldn't be allowed. So regulators clamped down on that. The rest is history. But there is still a lot of good content coming out of the BBC, and now they're pondering this collaboration with YouTube to get more of it out to more people. I think it's a good thing. I mean, why not?
Anthony from Seed Legals was part of the original iPlayer team, wasn't he?
It was a visionary product.
Yeah, it's great. The other quick newsy thing was, and this is, I'm going to fly past this, sovereign AI fund. So the UK 500 million AI fund. They're looking for a managing partner to run the fund. So that's via James Wise at Balderton. I don't know if any of you fine gentlemen want to go and run a 500 million pound AI fund. Anyone up for that?
I actually had a comment to jump back. I actually had a comment on the previous news article.
Go. No, on the BBC. Go, Andrew.
I've never understood when I want to see something why it's not available. Like, just charge me. Like, don't. Oh, this is not available in your region. It's like, I don't care how much it costs. I want to watch the damn thing. Just make it available to me. So I think it's fantastic news. And you're absolutely right, Mads. I mean, iPlayer started the same year as Netflix, I think, 2007. So they were right up there, and good for the BBC. As a boy who grew up with a BBC Micro in the early 80s, I think the BBC should be doing this stuff.
I had a BBC B and a Texas Instruments TI-99 4A with speech modulator.
Look at you.
I used to love the BBC B.
Dan's just earned his geek credentials this episode.
Okay, so nothing on the sovereign AI fund. I thought it was quite interesting. They're looking for a managing partner. Although I didn't understand why James just doesn't take his chair of the
doesn't want to give up his carry in his day job.
Is that what it is? I wonder why.
That's a guess.
No. Listen, we're not casting any aspersions here, but I just wondered why it wasn't absorbed into Balderton or one of the existing partners. Anywho, EU trade deal.
Well, it's a government. I mean, it's completely separate from Balderton, or it has to be, right? And the politically, that would be impossible. No.
I don't know the politics of it. I don't know the structure of it. But if you are looking for smart people to deploy capital who know what they're doing, we know them all. I mean, they're all in our network, in our community. And I don't know that finding another managing partner is the answer. Surely there's some version of getting this through funds that are investing in AI and looking at infrastructure for the UK. Maybe it's just part of a way of structuring particular deals that lives within multiple funds rather than its own separate vehicle. But I know nothing. I don't know if anyone else here does before we move swiftly on.
No.
I'll take that as a no. EU trade deal, the Macosa trade deal. Lomax, you've got some notes on this. So as the intra-EU trade volume slows, we're looking at roughly 23.5% of intra-EU by GDP. This is intra-EU countries trading with each other to 22. So that's 23.5 down a 1.5 to 22 across the last 2 years. The Macosa deal, which in principle looks pretty solid, which is the South American deal, but the overall macro, as in pounds, euros, dollars quantum piece doesn't look that impressive. And obviously the EU farmers are unhappy with this. But Lomax, what's happening here with the Macosa trade deal?
I think it's important. So this is a trade deal between the EU and Macosa, which is Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. It's by far the EU's biggest ever trade deal. It did take 25 years. I mean, these things do take a long time. Creates one of the largest free trade areas in the world with 700 million people and 20% of global GDP. And it's against the backdrop of the EU kind of failing to agree, a trade deal with the US, and also the EU looking to diversify away from China. So actually,
do you think that accelerated it? Do you think that the actual final kind of let's get the deal done was accelerated by?
Most probably. Clearly there was a lot of, as you alluded to, there's been a lot of pushback, especially from farmers, particularly farmers in Poland, Ireland, France, especially worried on beef imports from the region. So there was a lot of last minute horse trading between the various countries and various concessions.
We'll unpack that a bit, Lomax. Wasn't the issue the fact that effectively the South American farmers don't have to adhere to the same safety standards as the Euro farmers? Was that the challenge?
Well, it's not only that, but it's a tariff thing. So all of those have tariffs on them at the moment. If you remove the tariffs for them, or you reduce them down from say 75% to 20%. Then you're basically flooding the market with cheap beef. Is how the French and the Irish and the British farmers would view it, right? So look, in any trade deal that you do like this, there's always going to be people who push back against it, and that's slightly the problem with the EU, right? There's always the lowest common denominator who are taking things or sticking their oar in and or seeking to block things. But the important thing is this has now been agreed, and actually for the EU to do the biggest trade deal in its history at this time, there is a sort of element of rare earths here, because the EU is looking to diversify away from China. Certainly in parts of South America, there are important stores of lithium, for example, that could be would be a better source for the EU. So I think it's a good thing on the macro level.
The other thing I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on the Macosa agreement.
Yeah, I mean, briefly, anything that eats away at the absurdity of support for French farmers, as far as I'm concerned, is a good thing. I mean, still nearly 40% of the EU budget goes towards the common agricultural policy. It used to be, until a few years ago, well over 60% of the whole budget. And a big proportion of that went to French farmers. So they're probably not happy, but there are quite tight restrictions, my understanding, on actually how many chicken breasts or steaks that these countries can import. It's like 1 or 2 per year per head of population.
Their quotas, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So they've probably protected themselves, but I think it's a good thing. Good thing for consumers.
But this, as a reminder, this all relates to goods, right? Not services. This is all goods. So in terms of like technology and software, etc., and often, as we talked about before, technology software tends to be exempt doesn't really get caught up by the ambit of tariffs and or trade deals.
The other Euro news this week was OpenCosmos. So I put in my notes here: are they going to be an EU Starlink? Are we going to see any kind of version of EU Starlink? And then I read the notes, and they're launching 2 satellites compared to Starlink's nearly 10,000 with a license for another 7,500 more. I know the bandwidth that they operate in is a challenge, and Lomax, you can unpack this for us. But OpenCosmos, they have beaten Revolut, which was the teal-backed competitor. But tell us what's going on. We've got a new EU satellite constellation going up.
So this is actually a UK startup. Went through the Entrepreneur First program in 2015, raised a bunch of money since then, has just won from the Liechtenstein government, has just granted them high priority Ka-band spectrum rights for a satellite constellation. They've actually done something very un-European and very swashbuckling and very maverick, in that actually these rights were held by.
Liechtenstein?
No, not Liechtenstein. The company Open Cosmos.
Sorry.
In that these rights were actually already held by Revolut, the company you mentioned, which is backed by Peter Thiel, a US company, but they missed a payment on whatever the terms of the deal they had with the Liechtenstein government. And so the Liechtenstein government used that as an excuse to basically re-tender it, and the UK company Open Cosmos won it. This is a critical thing for them. It's a key to have access to this spectrum is crucial for high speed satellite broadband and secure data links. Clearly, they are not trying to recreate what Starlink is doing, because with only they've got more than 2 satellites. There's I think 2025 now, but they are building a satellite constellation. So there's definitely a story of European sovereignty here, and it's one to be excited about, I think.
It's also different tech, right? I think the Starlinks use KU band for consumer upload download.
They also use KA as well, no?
Yeah, but they use KA for backhaul, and so this stuff will be sort of high capacity for governments, for secure transmission, which is all fantastic because it's European sovereign capability. But they're not about to set up a competitor to Starlink.
And as I understand it, the way that their constellation works is actually a lot of the hardware and the satellites are owned by and launched by individual nation states, but they're providing effectively the constellation, the communications, as far as I understand it.
Let's keep an eye on. Let's keep a regular eye on what they're doing and how it's all working. The other quick news story this week was Meta signing 20-year agreements to buy power from 3 nuclear power plants in the US heartland and develop projects. So they're looking at SMRs as well. I then looked at what was happening across the EU. I saw that the Commission was looking to pull out a report, I think, first half of this year about SMRs, these small modular reactors. And in the UK, I saw that the UK government also this week awarded offshore wind farm contracts that will power 12 million homes. That's about 8.5 gigawatts of power. And I'm pretty sure that was to go towards their target of 40 to 50 gigawatts by 2030. So energy, no great surprise. Lomax, unpack this one.
Well, no, I think this is just relevant. It's not a big piece. It's just, these kind of deals are being signed the whole time in the US, where you actually have the tech companies, the hyperscalers doing direct deals with the nuclear energy companies, entering into these long-term PPAs, these power purchase agreements, for a staggering amount of electricity, right? 6 to 7 gigawatts of power. That's enough to, power nearly, I think, 5 to 6 million homes. Like it's just a reminder that AI is the proliferation of AI is so fundamentally driven by energy and energy costs, and it's such a big problem in Europe. I mean, I think in this year, just to take the case of Ireland, by the end of the year, a third of the Irish grid will be used purely, or electricity generation will be used purely for data centers, right? And Dublin's one of the bigger data center centers in Europe. So actually, we have a problem. These deals are being done all the time in the US. They have the space. I think these clusters are in Ohio, in the middle of the country. We're constrained by space, by location, by actual space, and we're constrained by, NIMBYs, planning laws, cost of getting stuff done,
all the regulation stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just a reminder that this stuff is happening the whole time in the US, and it's very, very slow the rollout here. So we need to get on with it.
Mads, any thoughts on this? Andy Rue? The other quick news item was the another U-turn by the UK government. You can't spend a day's news cycle without seeing Starmer U-turn on something, and this one is the government dropping digital IDs. It's not a complete drop of the principle of a digital ID as a worker, but it is another U-turn, bit of a mess. Mads, what's happening here?
So taking a step back, what is the project about? It's been said that it's about managing immigration and managing right to work. But of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. At the end of the day, kind of two of the most fundamental principles in technology is identity management and access management. So understanding who you are and understanding what that gives you right to access. it's completely fundamental to all information management. It's one of the oldest principles of developing systems back to the era of the mainframe.
But it's such a political hot potato, isn't it? It's just like they can't.
That's the thing. So for some reason, and we could speculate as to why, which I'll do in a minute. Now, 80 to 90% of citizens in OECD countries, so wealthy, advanced, Western countries have digital IDs. That's just the norm, right? It's the way you interact with your government. It's the way you sign your tax form. It's the way you sign your letters. It's the way you log into your bank. It's the way you establish who you are, and then a way to control who can access what. And that's seen as something that is just the way things are done, right? All modern countries have this in some form, except for very few, of which the UK is one. And you could speculate as to why. I mean, there's possibly some, Orwellian 1894 psychological big brother, it's kind of this libertarian streak that I, in many ways, have a lot of sympathy for, right? We don't want to be controlled by the state. We don't want everything to be monitored. But we're swimming in digital
ID, Mads, aren't we? We're swimming in,
the challenge is instead of having one, you then have 25, and they don't speak together very well. And, hand on heart, the UK is well behind when it comes to the digitalization of government, because you have so many systems and they don't speak together. What we've seen over the last 18 months alone, or 12 months alone, is this whole notion of Companies House, which is the place where UK limited companies, which is a great structure where you register what the company is and who the directors are of that business. Companies House doesn't actually know who people are. So you could file and you could say, I'm the director of such and such, and the Companies House doesn't really know that these people exist, which is completely nonsensical. And so now they've started to roll out some form of ID, but it is yet another new identification system that's being created to try and plug this gap. Whereas most countries have just said, listen, we need one ID so we know who people are, and they can use that from everything from the library and healthcare and Companies House and filing their taxes and everything else. Because, of course, that is the foundation. Now, there is an emotional backlash towards it in the UK, and there's been a campaign that it seems that 2/3 of the country now hate this idea of a digital ID, but it's hard to escape the thought that there's more emotion than reality in this, because Dan, as you point out, now we just have 25 other IDs instead, none of which talk to each other, and kind of the whole systems architecture side of it is just a bit of a mess.
But it's also a cost, though, isn't it, Mads? I mean, it would be such an expensive rollout. So I'm assuming there's a cost quotient to this as well as the political backlash. Is that fair?
You think it's cheaper to run 25 incompatible systems?
I think short term, it's cheaper to run 25 incompatible systems.
Think, and if there's one thing we're good at in the UK, it is muddling through short term. Yeah, long term, don't worry about that.
This thing is going to cost, I think, 2 billion, which is quite a big one-time hit, like new entry into an annual budget, especially given that we can't find any money for defense and various other important things. But if you think about the money it should save over the long term, in terms of wheedling out fraud.
Such a weak political position, though, isn't he? He's in such a precarious political state. I think.
Well, the corner he painted himself into was he linked it to immigration. He kind of found the one thing where he's like, okay, if I say it's about immigration, nobody can object to this, which of course is not really anything to do with immigration, right? It's not. But the problem is when you tell a lie and you get caught out and people figure it out, well, you lose double credibility.
Oh gosh.
It's absurd, isn't it? The fact that we don't have a single sort of biometric ID at this point. And to Matt's point, you've got national insurance numbers, you've got passport numbers, and it's just, they just need to have a strategy, have a goal, singular ID, so that people can't rip off the social security systems, so that people can't work illegally, so that it's universally available. Maybe you base that on the national insurance number and you bake biometrics onto the side of that rather than a brand new system. Use what we have.
Yeah,
and
great idea.
I'm extremely frustrated that I don't care whether the government U-turns in principle. All I care about is whether the U-turn or not is the consequence, the one that gets us the outcome. And in this case, I think it's a step backwards. And the Conservatives can't say a word because they were arguing the toss when they were saying they were going to do it, saying, oh well, we should have a national debate. There's good and bad things about the idea. And now, of course, they reversed it. Now the Conservatives say, oh, it's terrible. They've reversed it. So that's just politicking. But to Mads's point, is on the money. The fact that this is being kicked down, the can's being kicked down the road again, it's absurd.
Yeah, it's nuts. We have, changing tack, we have loads of little itsy bitsy AI news pieces pick up at will. So Apple announcing Gemini to power Siri. We've talked about that. Anthropic launching healthcare features. ChatGPT Health last week. Anthropic launched Claude Cowork. Mads, I really want to go into a bit more of this with you. OpenAI acquired Torch. Cursor launched agent skills, if I can get my words out. Alphabet hit 4 trillion. OpenAI invested in Sam Altman's Neuralink competitor Merge Labs. Loads of super lovely, random, juicy AI news bits. But anything in there that anybody wants to pick up on before, Mads, I pounce on you for the co-work piece? Then we should continue. Mads, co-work, what's happening here?
It's the big tech announcement of the week. Sort of about a year ago, Anthropic launched Claude Code. And Claude Code was, an experiment done over at Anthropic. At the time, you already had some great AI-powered development environments, especially things like Cursor, and Anthropic wanted to try something new, which is really interesting. It was this idea of Claude Code, and it was built as a agentic coding platform to help coders use Anthropic's AI models to build new apps. And it was counterintuitive to do it in the way they did it. Why not code in an IDE where you can see the code? Now, for those the listeners that are not developers, traditionally when you make software, you have what's called a sort of an integrated development environment where you can see the code you're writing, you can have multiple windows open, you can execute some things, you can run some tests, you can sort of have a bit of a command console to everything you're doing in a sort of semi-visual way. Whereas Claude Code is not that. It's a command line app, it's a command line interface, and you log in and you sort of a very old style chat interface. You just chat with Claude Code and you tell it what to do and it'll go off and do stuff. But of course, the seminal insight there was that because the coding agents are getting so good, we are now coding in a new way. It's no longer about every developer seeing every line of code that they're writing and having to assess everything. We can actually send the agents off to do stuff, sometimes a lot of stuff. And then rather than returning a few lines of code, they'll return the finished product, or at least a version of it. So it solves problems in a way that nobody had really seen before, and it grew like wildfire last year. And Boris Cherny, who was the creator of Claude Code, he was surprised after he released it because he walked through the halls of Anthropic and he saw that not only were the developers using Claude Code for coding things, but many other colleagues were too. The data scientists were using it for data sciencey things, and the marketing people were using it for marketing things. And it turns out that this whole agentic harness it gives you of being able to instruct the AI and give it some parameters, some objectives, and then send it off agentically to work for seconds or minutes or maybe even hours pursuing a project or an idea is really, really powerful. Now today, many people like me use Claude Code for everything, right? Whether it's processing emails or analyzing decks or kind of synthesizing information, because it can integrate to everything via another Anthropic invention, this model context protocol. And so you can fetch data, you can manipulate data, you can work with data, and it's just really, really powerful. And so Cherny and his team, they thought, well, seeing as we have all these knowledge workers using Claude Code, why don't we build a version for them? And they did, and it was released this week, and that's Cowork. And the powerful thing here is it was built entirely by Claude Code. Cherny said it took 10 days.
That's amazing.
Pretty much all of the code was AI written. I mean, it blows my mind in so many ways. We saw kind of last year, just end of November, Opus 4.5, Anthropic's flagship model came out, and it's the first one to reach more than 4 hours on the meta model, meaning that about 50% of the time you can send it off to do a task that a developer would normally take 4 hours to do, and about 50% of the time it'll get it right. So think about this, sort of half a workday's work completed agentically. It's very special. So Claude Codework, what is it? It connects to your Asana, connects to your Notion, it connects to your emails, it connects to your local files. And so you can ask it to analyze a stack of decks and pull together an analysis of that and put it into Notion. It's like having an assistant on hand, and it's really cool. Now, what I'd say is this. It's still early, okay? They built it in 10 days. They've just released it. It's
impressive,
beta
though, right?
alpha territory.
But it's working.
It's still quite buggy.
Is it?
It's still, it works most of the time, but it is still quite buggy. Another question is, I'm not sure how the Venn diagram of users look. The question now is, are the users that will use, kind of the power users, are they going to be happier using Claude Code? Because Claude Cowork has got more of a harness. You sit in a virtual machine, you're a little more sandboxed in. Whereas Claude Code, it's like, give me all the weapons, right? Just upgrade me to superpower max mode. So it's possible that users that would be intimidated by the command line will find this more attractive. And this is what we're going to be seeing over the coming weeks. I mean, everybody's raving about it now, and it certainly has a lot of potential. And if it does take off in the way we think it could become the application of 2026.
Anyone got any thoughts? Anyone used it? Andrew, Lomax, have you been using Cowork? No?
Not yet. Mads, so what's been the single most useful thing that it's done? Apart from the nice things you said, like, is there the one powerful thing that you've seen so far?
I'll talk to you about how I use Claude Code today, which I use all the time. And that is, as I said, is to process emails, it's to manage the backlog of projects, it's to integrate information, it's to do research, right? It's, come up with a topic, pair through all of this information, read these reports, summarize that in a document. It's just working with knowledge becomes a completely different experience. And that's the experience that Anthropic now is putting to Cowork.
The only main difference is that it's not a terminal. It's chat. So Cowork is very skewed to the layperson who can get all of the power of Claude Code in a much cuter interface that they can interplay with. Is that right, Mads? I mean, that's how I've been using it.
It's also running in a virtual machine.
Right.
Okay. So you are running in a sandbox. It is a more protected environment than Claude Code.
Okay. I didn't appreciate that. I mean, I just loved the way it was just so much easier to use. But then I'm more of a lay body than you are, Mads.
No, 100%. And look, here's the thing: if Cowork captures users like Dan, frankly, like you, right? Then you're seeing a massive new market opportunity opening up.
I won't take that in any pejorative sense, Mads. I'll take that in the positive, that we are expanding to the very smart other people who don't think in binary like your machine code like you do, my good man.
Assembler.
You one layer down. The other question I had for you specifically, Mads, was Yannicken's world models, and just to share a little bit more, because we're starting to see more noise. Obviously, he's been poaching, and the great shuffle of team members, and we saw thinking machines. There was a whole shuffle over at Mira Murati's bunch. But Yannicken world models, what are they, and why do they matter?
So as we think about the evolution of AI over the last decade, I mean, we've gone from kind of big data and data science to machine learning to deep learning, and then suddenly there's this whole explosion of generative models, right? Where we found out how to make the deep learning models create new content and generate new content. The challenge is, even if you have the best LLM, even if you have Opus 4.5, Anthropic's flagship model, it still doesn't really understand how the world works. I mean, it'll understand the words, but it can't navigate a room. It doesn't understand intuitively how physics work or how a ball would bounce. It could probably recite all Newton's laws to you, but if it observes them in practice, it doesn't mean anything to it because it doesn't have a notion of space. And so world models, what are they? Well, that's the next generation paradigm, right? If you've got something that understands all the words, and we're saying that's you take that to the nth degree, it'll understand all the words. Well, the next thing then becomes, how can you understand the space around you? Not just the words, but what they mean in real life. And so world models, they are that frontier. And they're interesting because everybody's talking about them. They're also interesting because they mean different things to different people. So you've seen the video generators that are all around predicting what things look like. So things like Sora and Veo that can create beautiful, movie-like things. Right? Some people would say that's a world model. I'll contest that, but so some people are saying it is. You've got interactive simulators like Genie that will respond to action. So it's still a pixel by pixel model, right? It's still a model that understands things visually as opposed to really have a proper spatial intelligence, but it'll create a world you can move around in. So in Genie, which is one of DeepMind's models, you're in a world and you can provide input to the model and it'll move you around in the world and generate what you see. Move right, move left. What do I observe based on where I go? And it does that without an understanding of physics. It just knows that this is probably what happens if you walk left, or if you fly forward, or if you fly up or down in this world. And then you have the what you can call sort of the physics engines. Those are things like Isaac Sim from Nvidia and others that actually understand physics. Okay, so they have a physics model of how does the world really work. But Isaac Sim can't perceive things from cameras. Isaac Sim doesn't have a visual understanding of the world. It knows physics. It can say if a ball is this big and it flies at this pace, etc., then it should end up over there. It'll move in this way. And then you have this fourth category, these latent world models, and that's where LeCunny comes in. His model is called JEPA, that are trying to predict in an abstract space what will happen if something does X. For example, if the robot picks up the ball and drops it, what's going to happen? If the robot turns over the hand and pours out the liquid, what's going to happen? How's that going to impact things? It's super interesting. JEPA have taken a dramatically different way to learning than NVIDIA's models, for example. So they're also using video to learn, and they can use that to predict the ball trajectory, and they've done it without labeling the data. So lots and lots of new things they're creating here. One of the comparisons they did was they said, well, if we have a robot and we try to take pick and place, right? So I want this robot to pick up an object and then put it somewhere else. Can I get it to do that right? And it was able to do that in 80% of situations, whereas a similar model from NVIDIA was not able to do that, despite the JEPA model being trained on many, many fewer GPU hours a year. So there's some interesting things they're building here. That's really what it's all about. It's this world model, understanding the world and using it in robotics and physical AI.
Well, he's definitely an interesting character, and I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see how this all unfolds and what other models are going to come online and how they're all going to interconnect. It feels like they're going to be a blend, which is going to create maybe if we get to AGI SI.
Well, I've said for a long time, I think that the LLMs are just the tip of the iceberg, and much smarter people than me were crowing about how LLMs were going to become super AI, AGI, and I never understood why or how. I just, including people who are far more technically adept than I am when it comes to the nitty gritty of AI. It just doesn't make sense. When you think about how a child learns, they don't learn language first and then learn about the world. They learn about the world around them, and then they learn language afterwards. Our brains then use that as a communication layer to help define the world. But first of all, we experience the world physically. So there's no question in my mind that this next generation of companies and the R&D that's going on, if it is within the OpenAIs and elsewhere, will be the next step change. And I think it does still mean potentially that the current generation of LLMs is the search, the search destination site analogy, the Yahoos and the Hotbots. I don't think we've seen the Google come along yet in AI, because however hard you try, you're not going to match word pattern recognition and probability to the complexities of the world, the physical world we experience. And so that needs to be grown from the causal dynamics of the environment we live in, the sensory data. And not just actually from observations, but actually evolving and thinking in response to interventions within the physical world. And that's where it gets really, really exciting. And I think we'll see some really interesting technology be built over the next 5 years, and it will not be LLMs.
Well, I think this is where you're absolutely right, Andrew. And I think this is where people get confused, is they see what, Opus can do, right, with Claude Code, and you give it tasks and it'll go off and work for hours and do things that are incredibly impressive. And people will say, gosh, it's AGI's here. I can ask it to build an app, and it'll build an app, and it'll connect it up to my database and it'll do all this stuff by itself. But ask it to get a robot to walk across the floor and pick up a ball. I mean, it won't even take the first 3 steps. It's got no idea.
But it
of the
also has no
physical
idea
world.
what it's building, really. Actually, it doesn't know what it's building.
No, I have some sympathy with people saying that, because the discussion at the beginning, right? How can LLMs be anything meaningful? They're just, stochastic machines randomly stringing together words to make up stuff, and they sometimes lie. And I think that's remarkably similar to many humans I know. Right? So
many police commissioners who were against was it the Maccabee trial? There's a made-up football match. I think the police commissioners fighting in court.
But I think that the key thing here is, when we talk about AGI, right? I mean, for me, you cannot have AGI if you don't have an understanding of the world. And there's no LLM that will ever get that understanding of how the world really works. And therefore, there'll be no AGI in 2026, is what we spoke about on the pod a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, no,
It's further away.
I'm totally in agreement with no AGI. The one thing I did see this week was Meta laying off loads and loads of engineers from the Meta team, but it did seem counter to, and I don't know the practical technology around this, but it did seem counter to your point, Maz, where I would have thought surely Zuckerberg would want those in the department looking at real world interactions and avatars and how things would move in time and space with regards to building new world models. But maybe there's no connect. Is that the case?
I've not followed the Meta engineers closely. I mean, he's had a bit of a stop approach to AI. I think if you follow it blow by blow, you're going to get topsy-turvy.
No, I think I think what's clear that takes us into a new point, which is that Meta are going all in on the glasses, and they're scaling back the Oculus program.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
VR is being scaled. As to your question, could you repurpose the VR team and use learnings from them for world models or whatever? I think that's maybe a
bit of a stretch.
A bit of a stretch, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough. It just felt like if we're now moving into context and spatial awareness,
I think that's a very romantic notion. Of you. You're a romantic view of HR.
I am a romantic, that's for sure, but not romantic. In fact, quite the opposite is the Grok X.
Oh no!
Western governments, lots of people suing Grok for sexualized imagery of themselves that they weren't even aware was being created. Obviously, they've stopped that image generation now. But what's the coup on?
This is just like yet another battlefield in the continuing dispute between big tech and non-US governments. It's just like yet another. Almost every week there's something, right? And last year it was played out in Europe, predominantly around competition, antitrust, and the digital services bill, and sometimes about tax. This time it's about Grok and sexualized images of us, people like us, but also, minors, which is the kind of shocking thing. And a bunch of governments, quite rightly, people generally have been shocked by this, to the point where some governments have actually outright banned X in Indonesia and Malaysia. And now this has prompted a whole bunch of discussions across the world as to what we do about this. And then the pushback from the States and from Elon is that we are or many of these countries are suppressing free speech. And then we're just constantly in this battle. So it will, last week we were talking about, access for teenagers to social media. This week it's this, and it's highly politicized, especially given what's going on in the White House at the moment.
The UK government is looking to potentially ban social media for under 16.
Yeah, because they're rightly saying is like, well, actually, if we're in a world where sexualized images of minors can be proliferated like this, and the platforms are not good enough to self-police these issues, then I think that it's a public policy question, and I think it's a legitimate one. I often come out on these arguments berating the EU and siding with big tech, but when it came to social media access to under 15-year-olds last week, and this week it's the Grok sexualized images of children, then I see that there's very, very valid arguments here.
Yep.
Against big tech.
It's quite a funny conversation to even be having, as in it shouldn't come up, as in these things should never have been able to function as they do. It just shouldn't have happened, is my take. It's just,
Well,
another...
yes, but the problem at the moment is it's getting chucked into. There's a whole perception, particularly amongst the right in the US, around suppression of free speech in the UK and Europe, right? And so that's going on adjacent to this, or absent of this, and then this just comes into it. So it kind of it's this kind of worms that keeps getting opened time and time again.
Yeah. Anything else?
Do you have any sympathy with that, Lomax? I mean, kind of this whole free speech
sympathy
discussion?
with what? Sorry,
with
yes.
the assertion that there is. You're always trying to strike a balance, but that maybe when it comes to free speech, we maybe have been, less, encouraging of free speech than we could have been or should have been.
Of course. I think in Europe, some prosecutions have been pursued, overzealously. Basically, yes, for sure.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
fair.
But I don't. You listen to Joe Rogan.
That is a big problem, right? Because if we think about what distinguishes us from, everywhere else, right? But I'm super impressed with what China is doing industrially, but I'm also very happy to live in a place where I tell myself I have free speech. I think if we don't have that freedom of expression, then what's really the difference?
Yeah, and there was this week, this I don't know whether you guys followed this story. This kind of Dutch far right, I don't even she's far right, like right influencer, just had her visa rescinded by the UK because they didn't agree with her views.
I didn't see. No.
I think she maybe said that Starmer was, evil and shouldn't be prime minister or something. But the point is this: I think in the UK and maybe other European countries, you've overcorrected on this for sure.
Yeah.
But you listen. But if you listen to what they say in the States, I think they've also paint a picture of the UK that is not the reality on the ground. If you listen to some people in the States, they would have it that any form of critique of the government would have you clapped in irons, which is not.
No,
which is clearly not the case.
There is definitely.
We're quite happy to.
Social web.
I mean, maybe I should lock the door because we're quite happy to berate those in charge in the corridors of power in the UK and the rest of Europe at the moment.
Last on the docket, Lomax, another one of yours. So the JPM Health Conference was in San Francisco last week. What did you want to pick up on here? There's
a few things, and some of it segues into AI, into Claude, and into Anthropic, and
that's where I was going to go. The GPT Health and the Anthropic Health. So
which actually, it's like LLMs are so big right now; they even basically dominate JPM. Right, JP Morgan is the 44th year. It's the kicks off the year in San Francisco. 40-odd thousand people convene for basically biotech and health. Right, it's been a very traditional.
Do you normally go?
I used to go a lot. Now that I have small kids, I go a bit less. But every couple of years, I should definitely go. And as always, you don't go to the main event. You go to the side events around it. Sure, like all conferences, exactly. Normally, basically just a quick readout on JPM on the conference from what I've read online is and catching up with people behind the scenes is normally there's a bunch of like big biotech announcements staple to this conference. There actually haven't really been any big ones this year, so that's just something to note. The probably one of the more interesting deals was a $1 billion partnership between Nvidia and Eli Lilly for partnership for AI for drug discovery. I mean, there's so many partnerships now between big pharma and various different AI companies for drug discovery, but this is just yet another example of that. The sort of themes for this year are what we talked about before here, is that GLP-1s continue to dominate the narrative a lot, but the shift to oral formulation is an interesting one that will happen this year. And then a big thing that's happening on biotech at the moment is not just for this year, but certainly for the next couple of years, is there's a bunch of patents on very, very lucrative drugs are coming to an end that are held by big pharma. There's something like $200 to $300 billion of drug revenue that is coming off patent in the next 2-3 years. What does that mean? That means that those companies will be highly acquisitive to buy new assets and new technologies, right? So it ties into this longer term narrative that I have biotech had a very good year underneath the radar last year, and that will continue to pick up, right? So I think that's
any of these off patents. I mean, I remember when ibuprofen went from like £3 a pack to 30p a pack because obviously all the patents.
I think it's most interesting in the context of some of the big oncology drugs, that'll come off patent. So that's really good news.
Anything that you know of that people would know? Any of these off patent drugs?
I think Keytruda's coming off patent. I mean, Keytruda's not a consumer,
Nothing
not a
that people would
drug.
use. I'm always intrigued as to when people
I mean,
walk in the booths.
you would use Keytruda if you had a whole bunch of cancers, but you wouldn't,
Right,
you wouldn't be
yeah.
buying it in a pharmacy. No.
Right. Okay. Well, nothing to look out for then, kids. Any other points on
But then
JPM?
really, but basically the biggest things is actually the release. So last week we talked about the release of ChatGPT Health, which is the sort of consumer chatbot for health, which I think definitely, it's only released in the US at the moment, but if you get a VPN, worth playing with. Claude has now come out and announced Claude for healthcare. So last year, Anthropic came out and launched Claude for life science, which was an enterprise offering to help teams within clinical trials, within drug discovery, effectively, B2B application of LLMs to those areas. Claude for healthcare has been released, and that has both a B2C and a B2B element. So they have a similar kind of chatbot style interface, with similar to the ChatGPT, similar concept. But then they also have a much bigger, as Anthropic is generally leading into enterprise, a much bigger kind of enterprise offering to help both providers, insurers, and ultimately drug companies are covered by the life science product, but to help the administration of healthcare, so to help hospitals, to help insurers, and that's classic knowledge work. That's classic like LLM territory, isn't it? That's where they can really cut a lot of fat. So I think it's very interesting. And sorry, just actually, since we didn't chat about it last week, because OpenAI came out again, this is kind of like constant, like one-upping each other. OpenAI came out with their own OpenAI for Health, which is their B2B offering. So there's a lot going on. And as a reminder, in the US, healthcare is roughly 20% of GDP. Yeah. And so there's the consumer bit, which is you and me uploading our health records, attaching our wearables. I think that's definitely a big thing, and that's definitely really cool. But the sort of the big prize is the administration and the bureaucracy that LLMs could be potentially very powerful in. One thing that actually caught my eye, which is that OpenAI put out a report summarizing some of the usage of ChatGPT for health. So 5% of queries relate to health. 1 in 4 of weekly active users prompt about health every week. So I think it's very interesting. The other thing is, which makes a point on the really cool thing about LLMs and the democratization of healthcare, is that OpenAI makes a case for ChatGPT closing access gaps with 7 out of 10 health conversations happening out of hours, and 600,000 messages per week coming from underserved rural areas. So if you're looking to basically expand like provision of healthcare, to out of hours and to kind of under-deprived areas, that's a really cool. I mean, that is their own report, so clearly they're a little bit biased on that. And then just to continue on this thread, you mentioned earlier Torch acquisition. OpenAI acquired a 4-person startup for $100 million, raised no money. I mean, this is kind of what we're seeing the whole time at the moment.
What does Torch do?
They
Matt?
acquired Torch. So Torch was only 1 year old. They are effectively, they were founded by a former healthcare founder who'd built a primary care business, which actually shut down. And I think basically the summary is, with health, you really need the models to really know you intimately as the individual. And so Torch has been working on this basically. So their core tech is a unified medical memory, as they call it, which is basically designed to put in data from hospitals, labs, wearables, and voice recordings of doctor visits to effectively provide a very, very bespoke set of answers to queries.
I was having a debate with a founder the other day about Jevons paradoxy in health.
Oh no.
Well, it was the debate was effectively my side of the debate was we will see fewer or lesser need for health professionals, and he was in the opposite camp. And I was wondering, with the proliferation of AI, will we see more healthcare professionals needed? Should we be telling our kids to become doctors and healthcare professionals? Obviously not radiologists, but is that the direction of travel? Will we see more people?
It's a very good point. I mean, look, we're seeing the use. I think that the Jevons paradox kind of is being thrown around a lot at the moment, but I think that's a very good point, because the more you learn about your health through LLMs. At some point, you might take that to a doctor. So you might end up actually getting yourself to a position where you
But
become
won't
so
the LLM
proactive
be
about
the
your health that
doctor?
no, I think we're a long way from that. We're a long way from that. And I've talked about this before when we had, there's 1,000 FDA approved medical devices for imaging, basically, right? But they are all doctor plus technology, doctor plus technology. The medical regulators are very, very reluctant to have the technology as the last port of call. And so that will be a long time away. That's also a public policy question, really, I'd say. There's one thing while we're on health, I will do cool paper alert, which is a paper I came across that came out this week, because I think it's a very tangible example of how AI can help, right? So this is a paper that came out, an analysis of 450,000 patients. They found that 15,000 directly benefited when CT scans were reviewed by a stroke imaging platform, which flags clots. So at primary stroke centers, it was linked to a 64-minute reduction between arrival and transfer to a specialist center, right? And in the context of stroke care, where 2 million brain cells die every minute, right, an hour is a huge difference. So that's an example of AI being used to triage patients, the patient then being accelerated to a specialist center much more quickly and potentially life-saving. It's also another example of the ability for, this is not an LLM actually, this is imaging, but of AI to upskill, lower skilled people. So you can actually come up with a very skillful decision in a kind of regional kind of triage center and get them into the specialist. The specialists are seeing, 50, 100 stroke patients a day or whatever the number is. But if you can basically get the people on the ground able to make much more quicker, like more difficult decisions, much more accurately, more quickly, then you can get patients late. And in the context of, as I just said, in the context of stroke, that really, really matters. So that's a really cool paper. But I think all of this stuff is just, keeps getting better and better. So yeah, exciting times.
Definitely an exciting direction to travel. I would personally trust an LLM. I'm going to measure my words here. I would be much happier trusting tech to diagnose than a human. So
I don't know about look. To be honest, if you want to jump into that, Dan, like just go and look at all of these imaging like tools, algorithms. They're good, yeah, but they're not like a lot of them need human oversight.
I'm with Dan. I mean, if you threw the data that's available and an AI engine that was optimized for this stuff, it would inevitably come up with better pattern recognition than a human. And they proved this, even 10 years ago, they proved this at Columbia in the US. They took a bunch of historical data over 30 years, and the AI predicted far more accurately than the doctors based on the symptoms, the likelihood of the patient having a terminal illness. The problem remains explainability and liability. I don't think actually at this stage it is even a problem of patient trust, because most people I talk to got to the point where they're like, I've had so many bad experiences with a doctor, I would rather trust the computer. And I don't know if you were in the deal, Lomax, but we had a company, Kieran Medical, which is a UK startup.
Yeah, which was not a success.
Not because it didn't have efficacy. They proved in the NHS a 10% more accuracy. That they could reduce female deaths by 10% if they were in their trial with the NHS, which is huge. And unfortunately, the government then cancelled their contract and didn't adopt the technology, which I just think is disgraceful.
Well, that goes to
a cash issue. It was strategically badly handled, and then it flipped out. Guess what? To an American company for not a huge amount of money.
Yeah, flipped out to a company called RadNet, which is basically buying all of these imaging companies AI imaging companies that couldn't quite get to standalone status, basically on a P&L
But it wasn't an
basis.
issue. I mean, it was deployed. It was not an issue of the technology not working.
You're right. No,
it was a strategic problem.
And also it's a go-to-market problem in health
with sales and marketing.
It's execution, and it's the healthcare system, man. As in, like, I think for something like that, a clinical decision support system into health, I think it's a 3-year sales cycle. I literally think it's that long.
It must be tough in the UK
So yeah,
as well.
you need to have the cash. You need to have the cash
Right.
to stomach that.
Boys and girls, we're going to move on to deal of the week. Mads.
Wow. Yes.
Mads. I think, Andrew, I don't know if you've got one, but I think otherwise we have. We haven't. Ooh, exciting. We've got 4 deals of the week. Mads, kick off.
So Quantinuum has filed confidentially for an IPO. It's a very exciting company because the technology originates here in Britain. It's Cambridge Tech that then merged with Honeywell's quantum division to create this new entity that now is filing for an IPO. The Quantinuum team says that they're very, very good at making quantum that actually works, but it's still early. They're not really selling production quantum systems yet. They do a revenue, I think 100, 200 million, something around that. And it's mostly around kind of selling tech that can create random numbers that can be used for encryption, so that when the real quantum systems arrive and threaten to crack all the RSA codes and expose all our secrets, well, if you've sort of protected them using Quantinuum's technology, then you can sort of sleep better at night. It's very exciting. They raised a round recently they valued at $10 billion. And I think, Lomax, you mentioned you thought the price tag of this could be as much as 20 billion, which will be something like 80, 90, 100 times revenue. It doesn't feel cheap. Clearly, given that it's not production revenue on the quantum systems yet, it does feel like you're sort of slightly buying into an R&D roadmap. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a little bit unusual to do that in the public markets. So let's put all that to one side. It's Cambridge Tech, it's quantum, it's probably IPOing this year, and let's celebrate that as a good thing.
Loving it.
Yeah,
And,
they filed. IonQ is at 16 billion market cap, right? So they last raised 600 million at 10 billion. As I said, I insiders tell me they're going for 20, but even if they don't get there, they'll certainly go for the 15, 16 of IonQ. And as I think I was chatting to you, Mads, earlier, is there is just this a big quantum is a very good way to illustrate the capital markets gap between the US and Europe. Take the top 3 most highly valued quantum companies in the US. IonQ at 16 billion, Quantinuum is going to be roughly 15, 16, and PsiQuantum at 7. You average them out, you're north of 10 billion, right? In Europe, you've got the top 3 teams, which technologically are not much further behind and/or are potentially better than some of those teams. The average of the top, Andrew will have a view on this, but I think the average of the top 3 teams in Europe is about $700 million, probably. So you've got like European best quantum, best in class. This is valuation, right? Not like best in class 700 million, US 11, 12 billion. It's a really good example of the massive delta. That's capital. That's nothing else. And what's cool is that maybe you're cool or not, is 2 of those 3 leading US companies came out of the UK. One came out of Cambridge, one came out of Bristol. So actually, but they had to go to the US to raise the money, and they command those valuations at that point. But we Europeans, as early investors, are leaving a lot of money on the table as well, quite frankly.
We're also getting diluted out, right? If you invest early and then you don't get these step changes, you ultimately get more diluted out as an early investor. And it's extremely frustrating when the technology is as good or better. But I've seen it multiple times, and it's a problem.
Just for the sake of discussion, so Lomax, I think you said last week that you felt European venture investors should show better returns before they can ask for more money to be put behind the asset class. Isn't this exactly undermining that very argument? I.e., the only reason why the returns aren't better is because there's not enough capital to push into the companies to push up valuations.
I'm with Mads.
No, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. It goes back to the chicken and egg point, you mean?
Well, I think we're saying the egg is here. Let's make some chickens.
Yeah. It kind of basically means that we as Europeans have to keep playing this arbitrage game all the time. Or
we need to create structures that make it easier to funnel more of the capital we have into local equity markets, whether it be private or public.
Yeah.
Fortune favors the bold.
I'm going with that one. Lomax, while we're with you, Aikido, tell us more. Deal of the week.
I got 2 deals of the week, if that's all right. I got IKEA Security out of Ghent, or Ghent, I guess as they say, has just become a unicorn. Raised $60 million Series B. They were only did their seed round 2.5 years ago, led by DST Global, who've been around for a long time, early big backers of Facebook. And it's a cybersecurity company. Exciting to see.
And Ghent is in Wales. You mean Ghent in Wales, right?
Ghent in Wales. You're joking, no?
No,
Ghent
I wasn't.
In Belgium.
Ghent,
of course. As in the altar, the altar of Ghent, no?
No, but now you say it, I know. But no, the only other one I know is in Wales.
Isn't it the altarpiece of Ghent, like one of the, 7 wonders of not the ancient world, obviously, but it's a very, very important masterpiece. It's out of Ghent in Belgium. So yeah. Backed by some by UK funds. I think Connect did one of the early rounds, but DST have come in and led a big round there. So good for them. And Parloa, which is a German company working in kind of call center automations, has just raised a series. What do they raise now? Series D, 350 million at 3 billion valuation, 6 months after the Series C, led by General Catalyst. Tripled the valuation in less than 1 year. So big rounds are happening.
Do it, and all euro, even if it's not Wales, it's still euro. We'll take it. Mine was an Irish news piece. UCD spin out Equal One, raising 60 million. Another quantum jobby. They're doing quantum servers in data centers. Andrew, what was yours?
So French drone manufacturer Harmattan AI did a 200 million Series B, 1.4 billion valuation. Including investment from
Harmattan is a very young company, Andrew, no?
Yeah, 2024. And it's got a young founder as well. Or one of the co-founders is pretty young. So they've landed a contract with the French military. They're supplying 1,000 drones, I think.
I love a good
UK Army.
French investors, French military, French drones.
But Harmattan.
Well, the larger deals with the UK military, actually. It's with the British Army.
And the round was led by Dassault. The round was led by Dassault, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it's like Harmattan. How should we view Harmattan? Is it basically like a French Helsing that's going to be very French because the French don't want to buy stuff from anybody else? Is that how we should think about it? I mean, or not?
Well, as I said, the largest deal is with the British Army, so they're spreading their wings wider than France. So
yeah, fine.
And we still wait. We still wait for in the UK. We still wait for this DIP, Andrew. No, this Defence Investment Plan or whatever it's called, still hasn't come out yet.
Wait.
Yeah.
Gosh. Boys and girls, thank you so much for your time. That was a pleasure. Any more before we stop? Any more? Any last thoughts? Any last news cycles you want to poke?
All good with me.
Great seeing you all, you fine
then
fellas.
We shall say goodbye. All the love, my lovelies. See you next time.
Goodbye.
Outside.